Douglas Murray reveals the dark future awaiting Great Britain if drastic changes aren't made. His shocking analysis ruthlessly exposes Keir Starmer's leadership, shedding light on the uncomfortable truths the media doesn't want you to know. What Murray reveals is bound to leave you speechless, as the political decisions being made today could steer the country down a path of no return. Are we truly prepared for what lies ahead? The reality is even scarier than you think. Britain is increasingly divided over the issue of immigration, with growing concerns about illegal immigrants overwhelming public resources. Many citizens fear that those entering the country without proper documentation are placing a heavy strain on the healthcare and welfare systems. Meanwhile, some believe the government is more concerned with restricting self-defense measures than tackling the root causes of the influx. Brace yourself, because what you're about to hear is more shocking than you can imagine, and it's only the beginning.
It's very clear. It was actually after October 7th. I said, why are we in Britain so stupid that we allowed people like former Hamas military commander in the West Bank to live in London? Why? What did we in Britain get out of allowing terrorists to live in our midst? Why is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Iran, who wrote the book justifying the murder of the British novelist Salman Rushdie, why did the man who wrote the book justifying and calling for the murder of a British novelist, why is he living in London? Why has he been living in London for the last 20 years? What has Britain got out of this? Why are we so crazy in Britain that we would give sanctuary to people who want our way of life over? And I've still never had a response to that question. I've asked it for many years, and I've written extensively about it, and I still cannot understand how a society can be so insane that it can welcome in people who want to destroy it. But let's park that for a second. The situation in Southport is, as you say, it's a very interesting example of what can happen with social media. I don't care about these agitators like the people you mentioned, let alone Alistair Campbell, who's a fascinating man in the projection that he is able.
I completely agree.
To do. It's extraordinary. He's a very bizarre man.
Firstly, Douglas Murray strongly condemns the British government for allowing individuals with radical and violent ideologies, such as terrorists and extremists, to live in the country. Murray argues that this decision undermines national security and British cultural values, contributing to the erosion of the nation's identity. He believes that Britain's immigration and asylum policies have allowed dangerous individuals to infiltrate society, fostering division and instability. Murray is particularly concerned about the growing disrespect for British traditions and sacred symbols, such as the cenotaph and the statue of Winston Churchill, which are often targeted by those who view the country negatively. Of course, is the result of a government that has lost control of its borders and failed to protect the country from internal threats.
But I have to say, having covered a lot of terrorist incidents in my life, one of the things that anyone who's wise knows is just wait and see who is responsible before you start sounding off. And unfortunately, there's lots of people who don't have the discipline to do that. Some people who in the immediate aftermath of something are just, as I say, scouring for people to blame. I think that there are several lessons to be taken from this, though. One is, we cannot be in a situation in our society in Britain or anywhere else where we are only one madman's attack from responses like this happening. I have argued for decades now that if we had a sensible asylum policy and a reasonable immigration policy, and we didn't allow thousands of people to come into the country illegally every few months, that we could have a reasonable kind of migration policy like we had in the 1990s, when tens of thousands of people were net migration a year. We don't have that situation in Britain now. We do have thousands of people coming illegally all the time and never being returned. And we had net migration of almost 750,000 in the last year of a Conservative government that had promised in election after election to bring immigration, net legal migration, down to 1990s levels. And they didn't. Labour, Conservative, the Liberal Democrats, all in government, promised to bring down net migration and to stop illegal migration, and instead they ramped it up and ramped it up and ramped it up.
Next is the concern about immigration. Douglas Murray expresses deep concern about the impact of unchecked illegal immigration on Britain's public resources, specifically the strain it places on the healthcare and welfare systems. Allowing large numbers of undocumented immigrants into the country without proper regulation or oversight puts immense pressure on these services, which are already struggling to meet the needs of British citizens. Murray highlights how this uncontrolled influx of migrants exacerbates existing issues within the healthcare system, leading to longer wait times and reduced access to quality care for both citizens and legal immigrants. The welfare system also becomes overburdened, as resources intended for the country's most vulnerable are stretched thin to accommodate the growing population of undocumented individuals. According to Murray, this failure to properly address illegal immigration stems from political promises made by both Labour and Conservative governments to reduce net migration, which have not been fulfilled. He criticizes successive governments for allowing the situation to worsen, with migration numbers steadily increasing rather than being controlled, contributing to the erosion of public trust in the political system and deepening societal divisions.
And when you have a situation like Southport, it reminds you that the situation which our politicians have created in Britain is such that you are only one madman's behaviour away from having significant civil unrest. And the problem for the Starmer government is they resurrected the EDL, that, as I understand, has not existed as an organisation for 10 years, and they've been desperately trying to say that these were coordinated and people were coordinated. And that was, by the way, why I got sort of dragged into this madness, was because people were desperate to have people they could say were responsible for the terrible outrages that happened in communities across the north of England, including, by the way, Muslim gangs of Muslim men caught on camera, some of them with weapons, some of whom, by the way, were being advised by a policeman to leave the weapons in the mosque so that they didn't get into trouble. And that's an amazing thing to see, but again, kind of to be expected. But what is it about our society that people were looking for people who they could say had coordinated this? I would say it's much worse than that. Would that there were clear coordinators here, because you could go after the people. But there weren't, Piers. As I understand it, from what I can see, this was angry crowds of people that sometimes became mobs, and they weren't coordinated. That is much harder and much more worrying.
Given the current situation, it is clear that public trust in the government is steadily declining, particularly since Keir Starmer took power. Many people feel disillusioned with his leadership, questioning whether his policies will effectively address the pressing issues facing the country. Concerns about immigration, national security, and the strain on public services, such as healthcare and welfare, have only intensified under Starmer's leadership. Murray suggests that the public perceives Starmer's government as incapable of resolving these complex problems, leading to a growing sense of frustration and skepticism. The failure to control immigration, combined with perceived leniency towards radical elements, has contributed to this loss of faith. As a result, many citizens doubt that Starmer's leadership can restore stability and regain the trust of the British people, fearing that the country may continue to face deeper divisions and unrest.
That we should have a threat of hundreds of thousands of people who hate Britain, who never, ever carry a British flag, would never, ever do anything that is patriotic for Britain. Why are we in this situation in Britain? I would tell you why. Again, it's because our government has lost control of the borders for years. And now we are a very low trust, very febrile society in Britain, where we used to be very high trust and where we didn't used to be at risk of having riots at any moment because of one madman anywhere in the country. We're in this situation because generations of politicians of all parties have brought us here. That is on them. But my question is always, why has it got to be always a one-way street on the toleration? We are forever being told about how tolerant we have to be. But it seems to me that the people saying that are highly intolerant of us and our traditions. The reason why the cenotaph matters is because it is a holy place in the British psyche. The reason why the statue of Churchill, which is always being attacked, is so sacred to us is because it speaks to the sacrifice of our forebears and the knowledge that we in Britain are a good country, who have been a force for good in the world, overwhelmingly. And that we have people in our country now who do not believe in that, who believe we have been a force for evil in the world, who march against our country, who threaten to despoil our holy places and our very identity. The British public should not endlessly be putting up with being insulted and defamed. And my belief is that we have the right to stand up for our traditions and a right to stand up for our holy places and our holy days.
Finally, Douglas Murray warns that if the critical issues surrounding immigration, national security, and public trust are not addressed, Britain could face irreversible societal and political decline. He argues that the unchecked flow of illegal immigrants, coupled with the government's failure to tackle radical elements within the country, is creating a fractured society. The strain on public resources such as healthcare and welfare is growing, while societal divisions deepen due to ineffective policies and leadership. Murray believes that if the government, particularly under Keir Starmer, continues to avoid taking decisive action, the consequences will be dire. The loss of trust in political leaders, combined with mounting frustration over the erosion of British values and identity, could lead to greater civil unrest and a breakdown in social cohesion. Ultimately, Murray cautions that Britain's long-term stability is at risk if these pressing issues are not promptly and effectively addressed. Do you agree with Douglas Murray's views and believe Keir Starmer can defuse the current situation? Leave us a comment. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel to update the latest information about the situation in the UK as well as around the world.